Can you identify this tree from its bark? If not, stick around and I'll show you a bunch of clues you can use to identify trees in the winter. I'm Mike and this is Outside Chronicles. I love everything outdoors, and if you do too, you're going to want to click that subscribe button. And if you find value in this video, be sure to hit that like button. It helps my channel and this video. It's winter in Western New York, the leaves have fallen, and the snow is on the ground, so we lost a lot of our clues to identify trees, namely the leaves. Most of these guides, like Peterson's guide, uses a dichotomous key, largely based on the leaf shape and the margins of the leaf. Sibley's is my other go-to book, and it has some beautiful illustrations. Again, lots of leaves, but it does show a lot of the bark patterns and twig patterns. So these two are useful, but there's a lot of species that are really distinctive just based on their bark and some other clues that we're going to go over. This is actually our second winter tree ID video. In the first video, we went over some of the common species in the Northeast, the beech, the maple, the black cherry, the ash. And there's a lot of other species that have some distinguishing characteristics that are pretty easy to pick out in winter. So this is part 2. If you didn't see part 1, I'll link it in the description, and I highly suggest watching it after you watch this video. This is the eastern cottonwood, the Populus deltoides. This is the tree from my intro. And usually you can pick out a cottonwood because deltoides means triangular, a deltoid, and it has a triangular leaf. But once you notice the bark of a cottonwood, it's unmistakable. It has this really deep, irregular furrow, and cottonwoods are some of the fastest growing trees in North America. This is actually a pretty young tree, and you'll find cottonwoods often around floodplains and streams and rivers. There's actually a stream right behind this camera, and there's a bunch of cottonwood around here. And if you look at the trunk of a cottonwood, oftentimes it's very wavy and twisted. It doesn't grow very straight. So here we have what is called a striped maple, and you can see it has these grayish stripes. The bark is kind of green, sometimes a little bit orange. This is a young striped maple. It's very smooth, and we can know it's a maple because if we look up, maples, ashes, and dogwoods, remember the acronym MAD, always have an opposite twig pattern. And if I look up on this tree, I see several examples of opposite twigs. So I know it's maple, ash, or dogwood. It's not a serviceberry, which has a smooth bark kind of like this. As this tree ages, these gray stripes will become shallow furrows. So here we have the eastern white pine. It has this brown furrowed bark, a little bit flaky, grows very tall, and if you're lucky, it's snowed, but I was still able to locate a couple of its pine cones, and you can see that they're very large and very woody. And if you're also lucky, you might find a fallen twig that still has needles attached. You can see they're very long, very soft needles. And if you pull one needle off, they come off in a bundle, and it's a bundle of 5 needles. And the way I remember a white pine is the word W-H-I-T-E has 5 letters, and the needles come in a bundle of 5. So this is kind of a tricky tree for me. It looks a lot like 2 different species. There's 2 species that have a herringbone or diamond-shaped bark, the ash tree and the tulip tree or tulip poplar. And it took me a little bit to figure out if this was an ash or tulip. Both of them grow very tall, very straight. The tulip tree is one of the largest trees in North America. And when I looked at the bark, I see that it's got this valley and ridge herringbone or diamond pattern. And the ash tree is typically gray. The tulip tree is a little bit more brown, so I'd say this is a little more brown. Also, the ash tree's ridges are a little bit more pronounced or sharp. This one, it's a little bit flatter, almost like somebody took a butter knife and flattened them out. I also took a look at the trunk to see if there's any signs of the emerald ash borer beetle. and that's affecting almost every ash tree in our area, and I can't see any of that. Then I looked above, and remember, maple, ash, dogwoods, mad, are the only trees that have opposite twig patterns. A tulip tree would have an alternating twig pattern. I looked up, I couldn't find any kind of opposite twig pattern, even though it's very high. Also, I can see some remnants of the flower of a tulip tree. So using all of those clues together, I'm 100% sure this is a tulip tree and not an ash tree. So this is one of my favorite trees to point out to people. This is the Hophornbeam or ironwood tree. It's got this shaggy bark, so it kind of looks like a shagbark hickory. Some maples kind of look like this. Now this tree doesn't get very big. It's an understory tree. These are probably max at about 20 to 30 feet. What's cool about the bark on these trees is it actually peels from both the top and the bottom of the bark. It's called the Hophornbeam because the fruiting bodies above look like the hops that beer is made out of. And it's called an ironwood tree because its wood is extremely hard. A lot of tools are made out of it, like axe handles and hammer handles. So this is a really cool tree, and it's come to be one of my favorites. Here we have a Scots pine or Scotch pine. A lot of books call it a Scotch pine, but I was corrected by a Scottish friend of mine. He said, Scotch is a drink, Scots are a people and a tree. So I'm going to call it a Scots pine. And what's characteristic of a Scots pine is this orange bark. You can kind of see it here, but as you go up the tree, the bark peels off and it becomes more and more orange. The trunk is also usually kind of curvy, and the twigs are very sporadic and very sparse. Here we have a sweet birch or a black birch. The younger trees have this gray bark with these horizontal lenticels. As the tree ages, the bark peels away and it creates these big plates. If you happen to find a twig on the ground and you can peel back the bark or snap it in half, smell it, taste it, you kind of get that taste of wintergreen. Also kind of tastes like birch beer because this is the actual tree that they use the sap from to make birch beer. Okay, so there's a bunch of new species that you can pick out on your next winter hike. Use the different clues and characteristics of the bark to kind of pick out things as you're going around. And if you find something you don't know, pull out one of your guidebooks and try to identify it. So I hope you liked this video. If you did, be sure to click that like button. If you want to see other gear reviews, how-tos, outdoor adventures, I'd love it if you subscribe to my channel. That's it for now. I'll see you guys outside.